introduce too much. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Betsy Scott. I'm the Executive Director of Programs and Engagement for the Alliance. I've been in marketing myself for 25 years, so I'm always very excited to explore opportunities in customer experience and engagement, and love the housing industry in that it's, you know, the most impactful product we'll ever buy as a consumer. So today we're going to focus on both ends of the customer experience, seeing what we can do to be more proactive and look at the customer needs and experience in a different way. And also when things break down and we have issues, how can we better serve customers and resolve those issues and ensure that that customer experience remains a positive one. So in order to do that, we're going to kick things off in the customer experience and engagement section today with snapshots from 2 presenters. And then later we'll also be regrouping and doing some think tank discussions where, depending on the number of people we have, we may break down into smaller rooms to chat about some of the opportunities in this space. So want to take a moment to introduce you to our 2 presenters today. The first person that you're going to hear from is Danny Small from DaVinci Innovation Consulting. Danny is a firm believer in combining Six Sigma to a jobs to be done approach to look at innovation. And I hope that piques your interest, because that's one of the main things he's going to be talking about today, in looking at how to understand what the unmet needs are of our customers by putting their needs first and their pains first instead of putting solutions as we might typically do. So he'll guide us through a unique study that he's done on our behalf, along with University of Denver and support from our friends at RISE. And then our second presenter is Luke Krueger with ICWhatUC. We did a podcast with Luke a few months ago with our podcast series with Paul Cardis, looking at customer experience and engagement. And Luke is a tech wizard in how to simplify and create better experiences and more responsiveness to customer needs through a combination of smart processes and technology. So he's going to talk a bit more on that side, on the almost the digitization of the customer experience and engagement process today. So welcome to both of you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to turn the floor over to Danny to launch the discussion and share what he's been learning in this unique research study.
Great. Thanks, Betsy. Hi, folks. Really excited to be here today as a lifelong kind of hybrid geek / creative. This kind of stuff really gets me excited. And I'm hoping that you will be able to extract some value from what we talk about today, because this study, I think, gives you some really great insights that you can potentially use to add value for your customers. So next slide. So as we move forward, I'm just going to cover a few major areas. We don't have a lot of time here in this forum, but first I'm going to talk about the objectives of this study that we have conducted for the Alliance and the process that we went through to conduct it. Then we'll talk about the findings. We'll dig into the numbers a little bit, give you some of the highlights of some of the things that we found in this research. We'll talk about some recommendations that we've developed based on those insights and findings, and the opportunities that those represent for you as solutions providers in the housing industry. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit of Q&A there at the end. All right, so the objective of this study was we wanted to dive deep into unmet customer needs and see if we could find some innovation opportunities based on data and make them actionable for the members of the Alliance community. So we wanted to have this be a scientifically driven study that would give you insights that you would actually be able to act upon. Next slide. So I'm going to start with the definition that I use for innovation, and that is the innovation I consider to be the process of devising solutions that address unmet customer needs. And I've highlighted process and unmet customer needs because I believe if your innovation doesn't have a process, then it can be very risky and very haphazard and random, which is the case, frankly, in most companies today. Traditional innovation involves, it's an ideas first approach usually. It's based on solutions. And so if input is gathered from the customer initially, it's typically subjective from unqualified sources, being the customers, since they're not experts in solutions. And then a lot of time and money is spent interpreting that input and narrowing down that list of ideas. And the solutions that are released typically fail well over 80% of the time. So traditional innovation really is kind of a game of roulette type of a process in most companies. Next slide. So as Betsy indicated, I'm a subscriber to the jobs to be done innovation perspective or theory. This quote by Ted Levitt, I'm sure you've probably all heard it before many times, but this really encapsulates the heart and soul of the jobs to be done theory. He said, people don't want a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. And that is the essence of the difference between focusing on the solution, which is typically what is done, in this case, the drill, or focusing on the job that needs to be done, in this case, the hole. So jobs to be done theory was made famous back in around 2000 by Clayton Christensen. There are a few principles that guide jobs to be done theory. First of all, people don't buy things just to have things. They buy things to help them get a job done in their lives. All right. Secondly, the job needs to be the focus of analysis rather than the solution, because jobs don't change over time. People have always wanted to put 1/4-inch holes in things, but the way that they've gone about it has changed over time, from a hand brace to a power drill. Now we've got robotic drilling equipment, etc. And the last principle is that customers are the experts on the job, not on the solution. So when we talk to customers, we need to talk to them about the job they're trying to get done rather than the solutions that we're offering. Okay, next slide. So I've developed an innovation process that I call engineerovation, which is basically a combination of the engineering process that I've learned as a Lean Six Sigma black belt and the jobs to be done innovation practice advanced by Christensen, Tony Ulwick, Stephen Wunker, and others. And it adds structure to what is typically an undisciplined, unstructured, unpredictable process of innovation. So when we start with properly defined, job-focused, data-driven customer needs research, then we can be confident that the areas where we're developing are fertile areas for opportunity before we spend any money, which saves us a lot of time, money, and risk. Okay, next slide. All right, so markets are usually defined by solutions, right? So we talk about the production single-family housing market, the lumber market, the mortgage lending market, etc. Well, actually, defining your market based on a solution like this, it necessarily narrows your market, and it ends up tying your value to a solution which is changeable, as we've talked about, and that subjects you to obsolescence over time as that solution technology changes. Instead, I define your market based on the people using your solution and the job they're using it to accomplish. when you do it this way, that instantly broadens and strengthens your potential market, because now you're focused on the job, which doesn't change over time. It's consistent over geography, etc. And you open yourself up to many other types of solutions to address that job for your market. So once we identify the market, then we go up one more slide. Once we identify the market, we conduct qualitative research through interviews among experienced job performers, right? These are the customers. In this case, housing occupants who are trying to provide housing for their family. So we interview them about the job or jobs they're trying to get done with the solution and their needs as they perform those jobs. Okay, next slide. So the next step, once we've collected those jobs and needs, is we develop a quantitative survey based on those jobs and needs collected in the interviews. So we then ask a statistically valid, diversified sample of customers to rate each of those jobs or needs based on importance as well as on satisfaction. So we get a score for each of those factors, importance and satisfaction for each job or need. And then we use that ratings data to calculate an opportunity score for each job or need. And you can see how that's calculated down below. So the importance and satisfaction scores is basically the sum of the percentages that rated those things very or extremely important or satisfied, as the case may be. And then the opportunity score is calculated based on adding the difference between the importance and satisfaction to the importance itself. So as an example, if 81% of the customers rated a certain need as important, then we would add that to the difference between that importance and the satisfaction, the percentage that rated it very or extremely satisfied, which is 45%, and we end up with an opportunity score of 1.17. So an opportunity score of 1.0 or more suggests an opportunity to add value for the customer, meaning that it's important to them, but it's not well satisfied by their current solutions. Okay, next slide. All right, so let's talk about the profile of the sample that we took for our survey. Next slide. For this study, we surveyed 1,287 job performers, meaning occupants of housing, folks who perform the job of providing housing for themselves or their families. So we set quotas for owners and renters of single family and multifamily units based on the national average breakdown, as you can see there. And we collected data from many different demographic breakdowns, age groups, education and income levels, ethnicities, gender, religion, etc., or region, etc. Next slide. So let's talk about the findings, the good stuff here. Next slide. So what you see here is what's called an opportunity map. And basically this maps out of the 58 different jobs or sub-jobs that we talked about within the overall job of providing housing for one's family. We asked customers about 58 different sub-jobs. So these are everything from, sleeping in the home, providing protection from the elements, all kinds of different things that people are trying to get done in their lives that they're hoping that their housing situation or their home will help them accomplish. So you can see along the bottom, they're split into different categories or themes. So these first 5 are in the theme of acquisition or acquiring the housing. Then we've got protecting or caring for the occupants, caring for possessions, doing different activities inside the home, using the space itself, dealing with the surroundings of the home, and the financial aspect of providing housing for oneself. So these dots represent the opportunity score for each one of those jobs along that spectrum. Now let me talk about each of these sections in turn. So this bottom section below 0.5, the red dots is the overserved jobs, meaning that these folks, these jobs are either not very important or they're very highly satisfied jobs already, given the current solutions. So there's not really an opportunity to add value here, but potentially on a lower priority scale, there could be an opportunity to remove cost in these areas through maybe a featured down or simplified solution. But again, that's a low priority given the other opportunities that we've got that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Next, we have the yellow dots in the middle between 0.5 and 1. Those are the appropriately served jobs. So these are fairly important and fairly well satisfied by current solutions, but there's no current opportunity to add value or reduce costs. So there's no priority here. There's really nothing to be done with these. Table stakes is the 2 blue dots that you see up in the top section. Now, these are jobs that are extremely high in importance and in satisfaction. So that means that these are things that have to be included. Any new solution that we offer cannot reduce satisfaction of these jobs. All right, so those are things that we have to maintain no matter what we bring out in the future. Now we have the green dots in the 1.0 or above category up there at the top. These are jobs that are very important, but not well satisfied by current solutions. This is your gold mine. This is where the real opportunities are to add value for your customers based on statistically valid data that we've collected from those job executors, the job performers. This is what they're experts on, right? What they're trying to get done. And so we've asked them about those jobs, and that's why this data is more actionable and valuable than the subjective data that we typically will get from typical market research. Okay, next slide. So here we've pulled out the top underserved jobs from that list. These are from the green dots. This isn't all of them, but this is the top ones, the top of those. I think this is the top 10 of 14 that we found. So as you can see here, we've got things like sleeping, recuperating and relaxing, preventing theft of possessions, preventing intruders from entering the residence, etc. The themes that are made up by these underserved needs are caring for occupants, the people in the home, in the household, caring for possessions, performing activities in the home, and finances. So these are the general themes where the most underserved jobs exist in the Uber job of providing housing for yourself. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we'll talk about where your opportunities are to actually innovate based on this data. Next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to pull out 2 examples of those underserved jobs that we just talked about in that table. The first one is storing and organizing possessions. Okay, there are many different ways that you could go about addressing this unmet need. Okay, it can be addressed through building design, through product design, neighborhood design, through services, or through data and technology. As an example, for a product design approach, if you're a building product manufacturer or a product manufacturer, right, you could offer, you could innovate in the areas of, say, cabinetry or shelving, aftermarket solutions and products such as bins and furniture, etc. Okay. Another example would be the data and tech area. If you're a software provider or technology or software or hardware provider, you could develop, for example, an app to help with decision making around sorting and purging possessions or other aspects of organizing possessions. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples of ways that you could go about innovating to address that unmet need. One more example, preventing intruders from entering the residence. Okay, again, you could approach this from many different areas. So I know that we've got a lot of different stakeholders on the meeting today, folks that are in the architecture area, that are developers, that are builders, building product manufacturers, technology providers, service providers, etc. Each one of you could approach and help to address these unmet needs from different angles. So in this example, let's take the example of a neighborhood design approach. You could look at lighting, at neighborhood location, at gating and security systems, etc. For another example of an approach would be through services. So working with HOA to offer security services, neighborhood watch type services, etc. All right. Again, you're the experts, and so if you're in these areas, I'm sure the bells are probably going off. You've probably come up with multiple different concept approaches that you could use to address these. But the idea is to just kind of get those juices flowing and help you understand that now that you know where the opportunities are, you can use your expertise to safely and confidently address those unmet needs without doing all the guesswork and the spinning of the roulette wheel that typically goes into innovation. Next slide. All right, so this presentation that we've talked about today, as you can imagine, really only scratches the surface of the insights that were revealed in this study. We're going to be publishing a full report in the coming weeks that's going to go into great detail into additional insights, such as insights by state or region, which demographic groups struggle more or less to do certain jobs, which housing characteristics make certain jobs more or less difficult to accomplish, and the step-by-step process to apply these insights to supercharge your innovation efforts. So look for that full report to come out in the December timeframe for this year. Next slide. All right.
Great, thank you. And there we go. If you do have questions, be sure to, as Natalie has said, type your comments and questions in the chat function and change it from all panelists to all panelists and attendees just so that everyone can see it. But we're going to continue on and have Luke give you his thoughts and overview before we open the floor for questions. So take it away, Luke.
Sure. Okay. I was going to say, I'm just waiting for my slides, and there they are. So, so to continue the narrative thread from Danny, interestingly, so I am a technology geek, admittedly, as Betsy introduced me as, but I'm also a Lean Six Sigma black belt as well. So you're gonna have this narrative arc of some data kind of permeating throughout this whole session. So I think that's a good thing for us. Because I don't know a lot of you, I'll just briefly continue the introduction of myself and my expertise. So I'm not just a tech geek. I grew up I came to this space, honestly. I grew up in a family where my dad, I always say was, but he still is a general contractor, builds custom homes. And so I grew up, as long as I can remember, kind of kicking around a job site. So I understand enough of this industry to be dangerous. And my first company that I started in university and sold 4 years later was also in the prop tech space. So I understand quite a bit about home building and renovations and that kind of stuff. And I candidly thought I was done with that for a long time, certainly on the founder side of things. And I was actually running a prop tech fund. And then this kind of problem idea drew me back into it. And the problem and idea was really around, my dad told me this interesting story about how he was connecting with customers, clients, and his service providers using FaceTime. And so if any of you ever get a chance to meet my father, he is in his 60s. He is not the most technically adept person on earth, but he was doing an increasing amount of work virtually. And I thought that was really interesting, and it got me thinking. And, one of the things, and I've got a slide that I would typically share. I don't have it in this deck, but it's kind of a cheeky old photo of a Model T Ford. And basically the idea is that as long as, industries such as home building and what I'll call building services. So this is anything from, fence rental to junk removal, this kind of stuff. Ever since the industry has existed and the Model T Ford was created, we have been sending experts and SMEs and customers physically to, sites or homes in vehicles. And now an interesting thing's happened over the last, call it 10 years, is that broadband is everywhere. We all have supercomputers with high definition cameras in our pockets. And it seems to me a shame that we are missing, or at least largely missing, the opportunity to connect with our customers using these tools. So we built a company. We're in the augmented reality video space, and I won't talk about that, but all I'll say about this next few minutes we're going to spend together is that everything that I'm going to talk about is what we have learned from our customers. We have, over a dozen home builders, 1,000 users in this industry using our product. And where everybody is trying to figure out how to use technology and, more specifically, do work virtually. What I think is really exciting is that with some of these tools, in particular tablets and mobile devices, is that we have an opportunity now to not just provide virtual or remote work options for desk workers like myself, but we now have the opportunity to do that for all of our SMEs, all of our workers who are at site, who are out in the field every day. And there is a huge amount of opportunity to connect with our customers in real time. And so I want to talk about some of those trends that we've been learning from our customers. And obviously, since it's our business, we've done a huge amount of research in the space. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about that. If we go to the next slide. So I'll talk about 5 trends principally. Number 1 is that customers are expecting increasingly an immediate response or solution to their problem. So when something happens, the days of, why don't you just wait at home, or why don't you just wait at the site? We'll send somebody there next Tuesday between noon and 6 p.m. We'll set an appointment, and you've got nothing else going on, right? So we'll just send somebody by there and we'll be able to talk about that. The days of that being acceptable are gone. And increasingly with, millennial home buyers, the behavior and all of the trends around video and instant messaging and instant connection are really changing that. One of the things that I'll say here is that there was a study done by the Harvard Business Review, and when they say on-demand service, over 80% of customers are expecting what they consider to be an immediate response when there's an issue. And how they define an immediate response is 10 minutes or less. And if we're talking 10 minutes or less, that essentially precludes the idea of us sending a vehicle to a site or physically relocating. So that basically means we have to use some kind of technology solution in order to serve that customer. And we've all seen, a huge uptick in this behavior, particularly over the last 9 months. I don't need to talk about that. We all know what's going on, but suffice it to say that a huge amount of work has gone virtual and digital. One of the stories that I like to tell is we've all seen this too in our personal lives. And so to assume that our customers are going to behave any differently, we all kind of know that that's how people are used to engaging with the businesses they do business with, and they want to continue that in other industries as well. So we can all get food on demand, we can all get groceries on demand, we can get rides on demand, we could get a date on demand if we wanted it. Why should we have to wait hours, days, in some cases weeks, for a physical in-person appointment with one individual when we have these tools available to us now? And so that's one thing that we've been noticing our customers are really shifting to, is how quickly can we use technology in order to be responsive to those customer demands. Next slide, please. And so one of the other things that goes along with using digital channels and technology is personal privacy. And in particular, privacy is a lot more important to home buyers than we often think it is. we all are living in this age of sharing, maybe in some cases, too much information about our personal lives through our social media channels and others. But what's really interesting is that this behavior doesn't translate over to the business environment. 72% of Americans, according to a study, are hesitant to share information with the businesses that they do business with. And nearly half, I think it was 48%, of customers report having changed service providers or the businesses that they patron according to their privacy policies and concerns over how their personal data and personal privacy is being respected from that business. In fact, over 80% of people in one industry or another have reported changing providers over concerns with that. So there's a huge push towards data collection, metadata, and big data, and that's really important. I'm in the technology business, so certainly that's important to me, but doing so in a way that really respects our customers' privacy and only uses their data for the intended purposes is increasingly important. And that's not to mention the fact that, since the world has gone virtually, again this year, we've all seen this, the amount of regulation in this space and fines for breaches of personal privacy has really gone up. I don't need to, I could give a ton of examples. The largest fine in the history of personal privacy law was given just last year to Facebook, probably deservedly so, for $5 billion. So the fines in this space are increasing, and it's something that every industry needs to be paying more attention to, in particular home building. A question that I like to ask, and I ask all of our customers this: if you were to think about your own business, and we were to do a random audit of 10 devices, 10 personal phones, personal devices, how many of those do we think would have a photo or a video of a customer home, customer location, or a job site that probably doesn't respect all of the privacy obligations that we have? And admittedly, they vary state to state, but if your employees might have customer photos or video on their device, if their devices are set up like my devices are, they're backing up to personal cloud accounts. And so your ability to control them as an enterprise, as a business, really disappears at that point. And then you don't know who else in their family has access to those. And it's a thing that's pretty concerning. When I ask this to our customers as an example, and we say, if we were to survey 10 random devices in your organization and how many of them have private customer information on them, people kind of chuckle, and then they look at the floor and they shuffle their feet, and they would say 10 out of 10. Because we know that everybody is used to using photo and video sharing. We're used to using or doing work virtually, especially this year. Probably all of your sub-trades and subcontractors are as well. And we are using personal apps in order to do that. And there's a real danger in that. So that's one thing that increasingly home builders are paying attention to, and I'd suggest that we all need to as well. Next slide, please. So this is one of the really interesting things, and there's not an obvious connection at the outset to delighting our customers and taking care of them, but I'm going to argue that there is a real need to connect your enterprise expertise and your subject matter expertise to your customers and your ability to serve them. I think it's critically important. I don't need to tell anybody on this call that's worked in the industry for any amount of time that one of the biggest concerns facing the industry is this expertise, and in particular baby boomers as they start to retire. We all are talking about this. We all know that this is a looming impending problem, and nobody that I've spoken to really has a great way or a great medium to capture this expertise and be able to leverage it in a way that's actually useful to your organization. Sometimes we rely on, let's get them to take notes, let's get them to write things down, let's get them to document processes, but none of them are really all that great. What I'm seeing in the marketplace is that increasingly there are video channels where you're actually capturing recorded video of these experts interacting with customers, which is really an interesting way to capture that institutional knowledge rather than have it disappear and walk out the door. With our customers, one of the things that we're seeing is, as for a myriad of reasons, some of them physical, some of them, restriction related, but increasingly we're seeing subject matter expertise get centralized, whether it's in their home or whether it's in an office environment, and able to support a number of junior people out in the field who are, this could be from a sales perspective, this can be from a service perspective. There's a number of different ways that we've seen this rolled out, but the ability to support junior people using video mediums and various technology platforms to support people out in the field, and really make use of that subject matter expertise by centralizing it is something that we have seen. And in addition to that, various technology platforms will allow you to connect and provide the same level of that instant on-demand support under 10 minutes, like we talked about earlier, with people during, or with your customers during off hours, during evening hours, on weekends, stuff like that. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've seen is having a digital channel for your customers is vital. So one of the questions that I like to ask our customers is, how many problems in your business could you fix quickly, easily, just by getting a set of eyes on the problem? Like I was talking about earlier, we all have high definition cameras in our pockets. So how are we using them in our businesses to be able to get eyes on the problem in real time in order to solve it? What we found, and this surprises a lot of people, is that almost 2/3 of customer issues that they will call you about, so think of like home warranty assessment and things like this, almost 2/3 of them can be assessed in minutes using a video channel using your smartphone, as opposed to, setting an inconvenient appointment a week from now to show up to their house, and depending on who the individual is and where they are, they might be hesitant to let you in their home to take a look at something these days. So it's certainly whether you replace traditional channels, I don't think anyone would be suggesting that, but to come alongside, to be adjacent to, the traditional channels and offer some customers, whether it's customers that are concerned with, COVID, whether it's customers that are just really busy and don't have time to set an appointment and want to be able to do things as they have time to do it, as time pops up in their calendar, to create a digital channel alongside traditional channels is something that we're seeing increasingly, to be able to connect with customers as well. One of the things that I like to say is we all live in a digital first world. And so we, in the home building industry, need to as well. This is not just post-purchase, but prior even to the decision being made. The brand and the ease of doing business with you and getting information off of your website or through other chat or other channels is critical, because there is a knowledge gap between what we all know and what, primarily first-time home buyers, but home buyers generally know about that process. And so our ability to bridge that gap by creating a digital channel is really important. Next slide. And so keeping customers is getting even harder. There's more and more competition. And what we're learning is that our customers don't value these in-person inconvenient appointments as much as we think. One of the things, and I talked earlier about a huge subset of our customers is construction services or building services. So think trades, think fence rental, think, junk removal, stuff like that. And one of the things that I hear over and over again is that, oh no, I need to sell in person. I sell much better. I close at a higher rate in person. And actually the inverse of that is true. Our data has suggested that 12% more business is won through digital channels because, and nobody likes to talk about this, but I'm going to say it, that for a lot of home buyers and truly for a lot of customers, that some of these services are interchangeable. They're a utility, And a lot of people win business based on who responds quickest and who can get the job done soonest. And so your ability to be responsive can win you more business. And that's increasingly true. One of the other interesting things in this space is, according to that same Harvard Business Review study that I talked about earlier, the best way to keep customers is to not delight them, but to reduce the friction when something goes wrong. And so to reduce that time to resolution, reduce the friction involved in getting service from one of your experts. And so that can include things like not requiring them to download an app or create an account or do some of these things in order to connect. And so I'll say that again, because I think it's really important. The best way to keep customers is not to delight them, but to reduce the friction when something goes wrong. And according to that same study, customers are 3 times more likely to punish bad service than to reward good, which I found very interesting. And finally, can we go to my last slide? I think it's my last slide. So I wanted to tell you a story. I would like to tell you that this picture here is James, but I'll tell you a story about my customer, James. So he's a general contractor, and he said the ability to create a digital channel for his customers has changed his life. Those were his exact words. I think that's a little bit much, but the point is that he was saying that up to 50% of his work week was spent in a vehicle going back and forth between different sites. And his ability to create a digital channel and to deliver excellent service not only has been better for him, but for his customers as well. And they're telling him that because he's accomplishing tasks in 15-minute appointments that used to take him an hour and a half to 2 hours because of the drive time involved. And it's saving his customer time as well. And they're thrilled. So that's my final story. That was all I wanted to share for today. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Great insights to kick us off. We have a couple of comments that have been coming in and a couple of questions. So if you have a question, you can publish it through Q&A. You can also publish it to us through the chat window. If you do it through the chat window, it's kind of fun if you share the chat with everyone, because then there might be somebody else who can chime in who's attending as well. So let me next pull a couple of these questions up for you. I'm going to ask you one that is, give you a couple of comments that have just come in recently, and then we'll go back to a question that we've got for Danny as well. Won't forget that, Dee. I will get to that in just a moment. But in the discussion, Eric Holt says, is COVID privacy, people who don't want non-family members or people they consider safe, driving business upwards for you, Luke, for what you're seeing in that space?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, there were clients that we had been talking to for weeks, months, and then they called up, the day after the first wave of restrictions hit, and we're like, we need this digital channel immediately. And I think one of the things that we've all seen is a digital channel has become table stakes to doing anything. My wife is an ER nurse, and she works with a lot of these patients, and she's had, I don't know if anybody else in this chat is similar, but she's had this blanket, like nobody, no service provider, no home warranty person, nobody's coming in our house. And so we've had several FaceTime, Skype type interactions. I think that's table stakes now. You have to have that.
Well, and it's also safer for your, it's safer for your employees. If you're that service provider, to not be, you don't want to be the partner or the service provider who's bringing something deadly or unsafe to people's homes as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's been interesting because I think privacy and safety really kicked off that conversation, but I've heard people say that we've jumped 10 years forward in terms of technology adoption because we were forced to. And that's, I would say, my own anecdotal information, and Danny might have the actual data because he's got more of access to that than I do. But from my anecdotal observation, I would say that's absolutely true.
Okay. And then I had one other question for you before I'm going to jump over to Dee's question, and then there are a couple other that are sitting in the hopper. So you mentioned earlier, and we've got some people who work with builders out in the field, and they help them assess risk, and they, and sometimes the builders might want to take their own photographs and send those to partners to get them to check things out. Are you saying, in terms of using your personal devices, that if you use that to document, have you found, or do you know if that's discoverable from if there's a class action lawsuit or anything like that? Do you have any information on that front?
Yeah, so this will be a bit of a disappointing answer, but it depends. So it varies state to state, and it depends on the medium. So if you are taking photos or video of a customer location, in particular inside of a home, there's a lot of identifiable information that can be traced back to an individual. So this could be anything from like, a bill sitting on the table or the counter. It could be any number of things. So you do have an obligation to protect that. And depending on how your devices are set up, if they back up to a personal cloud account, that is a violation of privacy. It does vary state to state. Are the chances of it getting prosecuted low? Absolutely, they're low. I think, what I was trying to do with the conversation is just say, this is coming, and we've all seen, us take a leap forward in the last 9 months with how much we do virtually, how much we do digitally. It's just something that as you adopt those channels, you need to pay attention to. And the story that I like to say is like, we don't use personal email at work, right? So why are we using these personal channels like FaceTime, like, WhatsApp, whatever, to connect with our customers, which, is aside from the fact of, how maybe unprofessional that would be perceived. We don't do that at work. So why are we using, personal communication channels for work, right?
Absolutely. So Dee, I promised I would get back to your question. Dee Sujan said, for Daniel, great presentation. And he said, what type of mindset does the home building industry need to adopt to catalyze more innovation? And how can consumers play a role in that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've addressed this in different forums before, but really, I know it would seem like there's a big mindset shift that needs to take place in the construction industry to embrace and catalyze more innovation. But in my mind, really, it's just a matter of looking at innovation differently. The problem I see in the construction industry, and let's face it, as an industry, we've struggled with innovation over the years. And now we're kind of backed into a corner where we kind of have to, right? The industry is being disrupted and transformed before us. And I think we all sense that innovation is going to be our ticket to relevance in the future. But I think a lot of folks in the construction value chain have kind of been scratching their heads about, how do I do this innovation thing? Because innovation has always had this reputation as requiring a lot of creativity, a lot of instinct and intuition, right? It's been seen and accepted as a very high risk venture. And in construction, we don't have a lot of tolerance for high risk, right? With profit margins where they're at in construction, with the risk that we already take on in the construction industry, that's just not acceptable. And so a lot of folks in the construction value chain I think they're kind of feeling a little paralyzed because they feel like they need to innovate, but they're not sure they can afford to do that, it being perceived as such a risky proposition. What I believe, rather than a different mindset, is what is needed is construction industry players just simply need to view innovation from a more engineering mindset or an engineering lens, right? That's why I think that this engineering-based approach to innovation, combining jobs to be done with the Lean Six Sigma process, is resonating so much with the industry, because construction industry is full of engineers. It's full of left-brain folks who are very good at managing a project. They're very good at following a process and driving it through to a successful completion. And so when you look at innovation as a process, as an engineering and data-driven process, I think the construction industry can be all over that. It's just a matter of approaching it through a different lens and a different method. And as far as how consumers play a role in that journey, just like I talked about in my presentation, they're key, but they're not key to designing the solution. They're key to understanding the jobs, right? That's where we need to shift our focus on the consumer, is by asking them about what they know about, which is the jobs they're trying to get done, and then leave the solution development to our talented people that we've hired to do that.
Okay. Let me see. How would you, you shared some of the low-hanging fruit, if you will. What would be the next steps if you were working on this with a client to look at some of the jobs to be done? Who would you engage in that process? And what would that process look like?
Yeah, so due to the constraints in time and format that we had for this study, we really kind of only went to a first level of study, which is really just kind of a job study. So we fleshed out the general areas within the job of providing housing, to figure out which jobs are under or overserved. Now, the next level, in order to actually be able to act on these insights and develop solutions based on them, is to go from there and pick one of these solutions or one of these jobs. Sleeping, right? What we would do next is we would do a similar study drilling into the job of sleeping in one's home, and we would map out that job, the steps that go into performing that job, and then within each of those steps, collect the needs or the metrics that the customers use to determine success at each step in that job. And typically we'll end up with anywhere from 50 to 150 of these customer needs that we flesh out. And then we do the same thing we did here, which is convert those to a quantitative study. And that will reveal the specific targeted, pinpointed areas where we need to start ideating to develop solutions to address those unmet needs.
Okay. So here's one question for Luke. Luke, very interesting material. I know your customers are service providers and builders, but I'm wondering, is there a way to market directly to consumers to pull or entice them to also pursue this approach to fix a problem?
So part of the reason that we started this company and went down this path to begin with is because our belief, and based on the initial data that we have, is that customers already want this. We already want digital service on demand. What has been interesting is that our customers, like, again, my customers, the home builder, the service provider, right? So I don't market directly to consumers because that doesn't really do me any good if their service provider doesn't provide a medium for them to do this, right? But interestingly, we've seen builders and service providers actually market the fact that they have a digital on-demand channel to be able to provide anything from inspections to estimates. I mean, you think about, like, and this is one of my favorite examples, is like, you think about junk removal service, right? Not the sexiest industry, but it's, it's at every job site, this kind of thing. Why do you need somebody to drive down there to take a look at your site and be like, yep, that's a bunch of junk, in order to give you a quote? Like, it seems very antiquated, right? And so now we have customers who are able to provide, hey, we've got this instant digital channel, we'll be able to give you a quote in 5 minutes. And to go back to, a point I made during the presentation, is that you're actually able to win more business that way, because people are like, yeah, all I need to know is how much it costs. Like, who takes my junk away doesn't really matter. I just need the service done. And unfortunately, if 1-800-GOT-JUNK or Waste Management were on it, they would hate me saying this, but that's a utility to most of us, right? We just want it gone. I don't care who does it.
All right. Let me see. Okay, I answered
Betsy,
those.
while you're
Yeah,
looking
sorry,
for
go
the
ahead.
next question, I'll just piggyback on what Luke just said. I completely agree that, and go even further, that customers don't care about your solution.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about, I think that customer loyalty is a fallacy. What customers care about is what solution can help them get their job done most effectively, which is, just a different way of saying what Luke just said. But it really does point to the job's focus, right? If you're focused on the solution, you're going to miss that insight. You're going to fall in love with your solution, and you're going to start to convince yourself that your solution is somehow better or superior or irreplaceable, okay? The only thing that's better or superior or irreplaceable is your solution's ability to help its user get their job done.
Right.
So that's what you have to focus on.
Luke, have you been tracking anything on your end in terms of, you said your general contractor said it changed his life. He can do these things much more quickly. Have you been doing any tracking to see what this does for productivity? And if you're a builder, how this might impact how many customer service people you need? So one of those softer costs, you get both the benefit of helping the end consumer, and you can actually affect your softer costs as well.
Yeah, so on the consumer side, we certainly do. We have a CSAT score that we ask at the end of every virtual session, and our score is like 9.61, which is like crazy high for the industry. In terms of productivity, I have to add the caveat that it really does depend on the use case. So for virtual quotes inspections, we've seen productivity. So like as a painting, we have a painting company customer who shared this data with us, and I won't name the name, but they went from providing 6 to 8 quotes a day to 30 because they're doing it virtually. And so, all of us on this call can do that math, but it really does depend on the use case. So for estimates and inspections, it's like 90%. And then for, break fix scenarios, it really does depend on the nature of what we're talking about. And, there's still, again, as I said, technology can't replace the in-person expertise for very technical issues. But what we've all learned, in all aspects of our life is that the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule applies everywhere, right? The majority of things that your customers call about is actually not that complicated. They just need somebody with the right expertise to take a look.
Yep. I went on a doctor's appointment yesterday because I thought it was going to be something I had to do in person. And I got there and thought, why didn't I just use the telehealth thing? And I think, just to get people's comfort level with that.
Telehealth is actually a great example because previously, 10 years ago, people would have said medicine is impossible to administer remotely. And now, probably 80% of the participants of this call have had some sort of a telehealth experience in the last year. And so just everything has shifted so much. And we really like that example of telehealth, but for home building.
Yep. Have you seen, since you're a tech nerd, have you seen people using technologies that you think aren't really ready for prime time? I think we're all trying as an industry, struggling to move in that direction, and trying to digitize our processes on the customer engagement side, and maybe shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah, and I say this as somebody who runs an augmented reality company, right? But AR and artificial intelligence are still very much in their infancy. Like my children are going to make fun of how bad it is right now. I already know it. Because there's so many people that are building and again, as a tech nerd, cool technology, but doesn't really solve a customer problem. And that's one of the big problems. Cool technology is fun. But if it doesn't help you get to resolution faster, save time, Danny was saying earlier, like if it doesn't help solve the problem, then it's just a cool tool that we might want to play with in our spare time. So, that's been my observation. Like if somebody tries to sell you something that says artificial intelligence is going to be able to, replace your customer care center, like it's not true. Like we've started to build some things like object identification, so you can recognize like make and model numbers of, various appliances and things like that. And it's fun, but it doesn't really help you with anything yet. So I think we're a few years away on that side of things, but it's coming. And there's interim steps we can and should be taking.
So I see, you're answering things, and Danny is shaking his head, and I think he wants to. But I'm struck by the fact that I think you guys are brothers from another mother. And I also find before you jump back in, Danny, I find your approach to looking at housing from the Six Sigma side, and we've had some people talk about that before on the more nuts and bolts, the home delivery aspects of it, and related to offsite construction and things. But I think there might be an opportunity for us to do something where we step back and look at housing and say, how would Six Sigma reinvent the home delivery process? And we try and pull some more insights from folks like you who are looking at perhaps product development and customer experiences and engagement, and then also perhaps look down the chain. How would we reinvent the business model aspect? What would a Six Sigma person do with attainability? What would they do in more depth with home delivery? So I just wanted to throw that out there because it kind of struck me just listening to you two brothers chiming in with each other. And I heard you said something earlier, and I think I was actually offline in the moment, but you said something about it wasn't the opportunities, what was that thing, Danny, where it's the trigger point, it's the thing that if you really screw it up, you're in trouble? What was that? So it wasn't the low-hanging fruit, and it wasn't the jobs that are overperforming, but you both mentioned
the table stakes.
Yeah, table stakes needs.
Yeah.
Yep. So what were you gonna say? I apologize.
So just like you said, just hearing Luke talk about the invention of cool tech for cool tech's sake, and the fact that that's not going to get you anywhere unless it actually addresses the needs. It helps them get the job done better. I am obviously my whole pitch to innovators is innovate like an engineer, right? I want people to introduce a structured scientific approach. My undergrad is in mechanical engineering, and so obviously I have an affinity to the engineer's approach. My wife, I tell her constantly, engineer's way saves the day. So I'm a big fan of the engineer's process, but at the same time, you need to temper that, because if you're all driven by R&D, if your innovation process is driven by R&D, you're going to have a very, very low success rate and a very low ROI on your innovation, because R&D, let's face it, they're interested in inventing cool stuff, right? And unless they are tempered and balanced by a very close connection to the customer and the jobs they're trying to get done, and unless those jobs and those needs and which ones are underserved and overserved are guiding that research and development, then you're going to have a very expensive roulette game on your hands as far as innovation goes.
Well, and I think
it has to come together, right? It has to be both the innovation or the engineering and the creative coming together to balance the approach.
And that's certainly true on the customer side, and that it's true, and we'll talk about that a bit more tomorrow in the digitization section. Really, for digitization, the customer it can be, and there's some nice tie-ins from what you talked about, Luke, for the customer experience end, but certainly the internal customer. I think we've all, if you use the example that we've all in our business life or even in our personal life tried to implement some sort of technology to unify us in the way that we approach something, but we often do a terrible job in identifying what the root problems are and what people need things to do for them. So I think that's just another example. How many implementations have you made of just like a business, like a software, like a photo capture solution that you haven't thought through well enough? So I think we think of that in terms of what's the product that we're delivering, whether that product is the home or the service that we're delivering to the end customer, and also step back and look at it in some of the real world experiences that we've had and think more about what are those pains first. Absolutely. So I don't see any more questions at the moment. If anybody does have anything else that they wanted to ask in relation to these presentations, we do have a discussion thread in the lounge area. You can access it. You can also go through the chat function. The chat room function. So you go to the home screen for the event, and the lounge tab is at the top. And there's also a chat room function directly at the bottom. So if you think of something else that you'd like to know from these two guys that you want to ask, please go there. And you'll also have an opportunity. We'll get back together at 2:30 to open the floor and have a bit of a dialogue with people who are on the phone. Where everyone is the presenter, and we've got some questions that we want to ask you. Get your take on it. What are you guys seeing in the field in terms of digitizing for the customer experience? How are you learning what your consumers really need? What other opportunities and issues are you seeing in customer experiences and engagement now that we should be talking about? So that will start at 2:30. And you'll just go back into the agenda for this session and click on the join button that will go live at 2:30. That will be a I'm mixing my platforms. That will be a Zoom meeting platform. So if you've attended a lot of Zoom meetings like we all have in the last several months, you'll be able to make your video camera live and your audio live as soon as you come in. And then depending on how many folks we have, we may stay in the room together, and we may split into additional rooms. So that starts at 2:30. And then I did also want to mention that later, we will have a meet and greet. We didn't do a session live on Build to Rent this time around. We did something earlier in the year, but we do have a great recording that's with Brad Hunter and a couple of folks talking about the state of the Build to Rent market from a production housing standpoint. So I'd highly encourage you to watch that when you get a chance. I think it's about 20-25 minutes long. If you don't get a chance to watch it before the meet and greet, no worries. But those folks will all be here. It will be co-hosted by Brad, Dennis, and Margaret Whelan. And that will be a good chance for you if you're in the space or you're thinking of getting in the space to connect with others who are in that space as well. That will be our last session today. So come next at 2:30 for the think tanks around customer experience and engagement, and then come back later for the meet and greet on Build to Rent. But thank you guys very much for your insights, and look forward to opening up that dialogue in a little bit.
Thanks, Betsy.
All right,
thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.